Gilbert, I know that, okay, there we go.
Yes, I started recording.
Thank you. Carlos, would you mind muting your phone for right now? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
We've all vertical.
Oh, he's driving. That's why it's sideways. Hope he's not driving sideways.
You're fine, Carlos. You're fine.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Well, good afternoon. Side somewhere. That means accident, right?
Good afternoon, everyone, to today's Upper Rio Grande Flood Planning Group meeting. Today is September 14, 2022. For the record, it is 1:06 p.m. And so we've met quorum. At this point, I start the meeting agenda item number 2. If there's anybody from the public that wants to address this group, please do so now. Hearing none, let's move on to agenda item number 3. Review and approve the minutes held on July 20th, July 26th, and July 28th.
Yes, so it was quite a busy time for us in July, and so there are 3 meetings that I'm asking for approval on. If there are any questions, I can answer them right now.
Everybody looks.
Dave?
If there's no input for any of the minutes, I'll make a motion to accept all 3.
Seconded.
Okay, second by Jeff Bennett.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Whoops. That was a late aye, I hope.
It's okay, the driving lag. It's not very kind. I love Del Rio, that's why I make jokes. Anyway, I got family there. Hearing none. And nobody opposed. Okay, motion passes.
Right.
Agenda item number 3, discussion of potential action regarding administrative expenses to be submitted to the TWDB for reimbursement.
Yes, so we do not have any items to report for expenses at this time. I do want to make a clarification. I'm sorry, we're so far into this process, but Richard was very kind in explaining to me the process again. When we present this agenda item, moving forward, we're only going to be asking for approval on the administrative expenses as they relate to the Rio Grande Council of Governments. We will then provide another agenda item to inform you of the expenses with our subcontractor. But when we present this item to you moving forward, it's only going to be for Rio Grande COG, not for the subcontractor.
Got it.
So there's no other action I'm asking for on this item.
Got it. Agenda item number 5, updates from Richard Bagans from Texas Water Development Board.
Hi, everyone. This is Richard from TWDB. No real new updates, just reminders of what's kind of going on. All of the region's draft plans are at TWDB right now, undergoing intensive review. We're looking at essentially fatal flaws called level 1 comments that we will be returning back to regions, which means you guys have to fix or respond to. And then there are just suggestions on how to make the plan better or level 2 comments. We expect to give those level 1 and level 2 comments back to all the groups at the end of October. So that's the timeline for that. Administratively, we just received the amended subcontract between Rio Grande COG and AECOM with the additional funding that came along with tasks 11, 12, and 13. So as you guys discussed, agenda item number 7 today, that's where the additional funding comes into play when you guys are deciding which FMEs to perform for task 12. So that is under the subcontract is under TWDB review right now, and we'll just keep working with Annette from Rio Grande COG on that. Anything else? No, we've been trying to keep up on what we call our newsletters or updates. We send them out to all technical consultants, sponsors, and voting and non-voting members. So we regularly send those out with a ton of information. That's honestly the best way if you're just wanting to see what's going on, what's moving. Just take a glance at those emails for snippets of what's going on. Other than that, that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions for me at this time?
Hey, Richard, it's Dave.
Hey.
Level one, if there are any level one responses, do you guys give those to the contractor as early as possible? And not wait till the end of October, or do you, are they, I mean, so they can get busy on them, or how does that
Yeah.
work?
So we are in that stage right now in kind of even within level one, there's like is this going to take the contractors a ton of time to fix? Or is it just like a minor tweak that's just part of like statutory requirements that they just need to tweak? So we are in the midst, like this week, determining if there's any like huge fatal flaws that will take contractors maybe a couple weeks to figure out. And we will be getting that out to contractors within the next week or two. But then otherwise, the level one comments that are just smaller, and just require small tweaks, we're holding on until we release all of them end of October.
Okay, and does your distribution for the comments come to the COG and then to the contractor, or both, or how do they come in?
We'll be sending it to, I believe, the chair, the sponsor, and the technical consultants. Don't know if it's going to all the members, but I'm assuming at the chairs and sponsors' discretion that share it as needed. Oh, actually, you guys will eventually be seeing all the comments because you guys have to give the consultants direction on how to like proceed or how you want to respond if there's any like gray area. So
Okay.
you all will have a review of all the comments at some point.
Thank you.
Richard, I have another question.
Yes.
This morning, you all sent out an email and I saw a cake. What flavor was it? Was it any good?
For people that saw the email broadcast, when all the draft plans were submitted, our director Reem June just got a little like image cake of all the 15 regions on a sheet cake, but it was
Cool.
just half vanilla, half chocolate.
Oh, okay, got it.
I saw
And
the
we
note.
had probably
Yeah.
40 binders of draft plans with us.
It served as a consolation prize, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else, Richard?
That's all I have. Thank you all very much.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 6, 7 and 8, ACOM at your discretion.
Hey, thank you, Omar. Hey, Chris, are you gonna share your screen or?
Yes, should be sharing here in 1 second.
All righty, we got it here. We're up and running. Hey, thank you guys again. Gilbert Onduho with AECOM. We're just gonna give you guys here at this regional flood plan meeting some general updates to the plan. So if you want to go, the discussion items that we're gonna have, we're gonna give general updates. We're also gonna review the contract amendment that moved the monies from task 12 to task 11. And also we're gonna have the discussion on potential FMEs that we will be performing on task 12 on the amendment phase. And then here are the general updates. So our public meeting is going to be held today. It's going to be at 5 p.m. It's going to be at the COG offices. They're located on 8037 Lockheed. And it's the Suite 100. It'll be today at 5 p.m. And also just to remind you guys that the public comment period actually started August 14th when we announced a public meeting, and it's going to run through October 14th. We need to run it another 30 days beyond our public meeting here. And here's some important dates that we've got coming up here. We're coordinating with the COG, on receiving the public draft comments. That's in progress right now. Also on September 30th, that's our deadline to submit the model uploads to TWDB TDIS system. Between October and November, we will be receiving TWDB comments on the draft RFP. Depending on when we get those comments, we're thinking early December, we'll address those public TWDB and the public comments. We're also looking to submit a final draft RFP to the regional flood planning group for review and approval. We're looking at early December to get that over to you all. If we can get it sooner, we will provide it sooner. As well, we're going to have a final RFPG meeting to approve the submittal of the final RFP to TWDB. We're probably looking, mid-December to get that. We need to have it at least 14 days prior to the January 23rd deadline. And our deadline to submit is January 10th, 2023. We also have some other RFP dates on here. We've got the amendment, which is going to be task 12 to 13. We're looking to submit that. I mean, that's going to be happening between now and June 2023. And we're looking at July 14th, 2023 for the adoption of the amended RFP on there. Here's a couple of pointers for the RFP public comment period. How to review it. We've got online here with the site that we have on here in person. It can be reviewed at 3 different locations where we have the plan located at. It's here at the Rio Grande COG in El Paso. It's in Reeves County, at the county courthouse there in Pecos, Texas. And the 3rd location is the Rio Grande Council of Governments. That's located in Marfa, Texas. How to submit your comments in person? You can submit them today at the meeting we're having at 5 p.m. You can send them via email to Annette G at the Rio Grande Council of Governments, and also via email. You can email it to the Rio Grande Council of Governments. Attention, Annette Gutierrez, again at the 8037 Lockheed, Suite 100 address.
Yeah, I'll just clarify that last one was for snail mail, not email. Regular mail.
I'm sorry, it was snail mail, my bad. But thank you, Chris. And then the next one, this is kind of showing you the overall schedule that we've been working on. And the point I want to make is look at the green arrow on top. This is where we are at in the process right now. We've submitted the draft RFP. We're in the public comment period right now. As you can see, our submittal on this particular plan on the final one is going to be January 10th of 2023. And again, at that same time, it's going to initiate the 2nd cycle of contracts for TWDB to begin on the next cycle of that. So our amended contract is going to be due in, I believe it's September of 2023. And the state flood plan is going to be due in September 1st of 2024. This is just an overall schedule of the whole project process that we have been ongoing on.
Just a quick comment on that timeline, Gilbert. We haven't officially released it, but in the initial discussions, just to give everyone a heads up, this is estimate timing right now. We're kind of, because of the amended plan due next July, we're kind of potentially not going to start a lot of the contract stuff for the 2nd cycle until after next July. So looking at next September or October to really start the 2nd cycle, just to give everyone a heads up to say, like, until next July, you're kind of still just focusing on the amended plan, not really the 2nd cycle just yet.
Alrighty. Thanks, Richard.
Hey, this is Dave. I've got a question about public comment. In the first 30 days, have we received any yet?
No. We have not received any comments.
Nothing in the first 30 days.
Okay, sorry. Later.
But that's not to say anything, Dave. We've got the meeting today, and then we've got 30 additional days after the meeting today. So hopefully,
Oh, I know. I just,
fingers crossed.
everybody waits till the last minute.
Or they wait till it rains.
Yeah.
To give
It's been raining. Come on, guys.
to give people, Dave, like a statistic on what we've seen in other regions. We've seen 0 public comments though in other regions, and we've seen up to like 60 written comments, and up to our highest public in-person participation was 30 people, I think, in person for one of the regions. But again, we've had 0 to 30 in person, 0 to 60 written is what we've seen so far.
What areas of Texas are drawing the most participation?
I believe, surprisingly, it was the Upper Red in Amarillo area, the Panhandle, that received the most in-person participation, or in person, I believe. So that was actually surprising. I forget who has the most written.
Okay. Thanks.
I would assume like the Houston area, right?
Yeah.
They haven't had theirs yet. Theirs is later this month, so we'll see when the Houston area has theirs.
Take pictures. I want to see it.
All righty, we'll see you on here.
All right.
Just go ahead, Chris, and I'll turn it over to Chris from here on out.
Thanks, Gilbert. So now we're just going to go over the review of the contract amendment from Task 12 and Task 11. There was an additional $666,400 that was allocated to the Upper Rio Grande region. Out of the initial amounts that were allocated for Task 11, 12, and 13, we requested that we move $176,596, basically half of the amount of Task 12 from Task 12 to Task 11, which deals with the outreach and data collection to support Tasks 1 through 9. That change was approved by the RFPG on May 25th, 2022. The last day that work can be performed on Tasks 1 through 11 is January 10th, 2023. The last day that work can be performed on Task 12 and 13 is the end of the year of 2023, right before 2024. So this is just to give you all an idea of the budget that we're working with for Task 12 because we're about to talk about this next task, which is to perform identified flood management evaluations, identify, evaluate, and recommend additional flood mitigation projects. So we're working with a total budget of $176,596, and we're going to be talking about how we plan to spend that and get your all's feedback on selecting some of those FMEs that we want to perform. And just to clarify, Task 13, once we perform those FMEs and evaluate what comes out of those evaluations as new FMPs, we will then have to go through the amendment phase to adopt those new FMPs and make any updates to the FMEs as part of the amended RFP, and that's what this $146,808 is reserved for in Task 13. Any questions there before we jump into which FMEs we're thinking about performing?
Yeah, I have a quick question. With that additional $666,000, do you know what that brings total funding to the total project costs? I'm just kind of curious.
Off the top of my head, Gilbert, do you happen to know? I'm not
I
sure
think
what the total was.
It brings it to about 1.8 million. I don't have the exact number, Jeff, but the initial contract was for 1.1 million for us, and that's going on the high side there. But I think it was $1,080,000 on our end plus whatever the COG expenses and all that was. But I don't have the exact number right now. Richard, do you have it?
That's close enough. I'm just looking for ballpark. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me. Original budget. So total budget for this entire cycle with the additional funding was 1.7 million, 1.75 essentially. The original budget was 1.08 million. So there was an additional can't think, 600 or so thousand. So there you go.
Thank you.
Right, and I guess I didn't mention out of that 666,400, 50,000 of that went to the Rio Grande COG. All right, so now we're going to get into discussion on potential FMEs to perform during this Task 12 amendment phase. First, we just wanted to talk about some of the considerations that we came up with. Now, these are a first cut at trying to prioritize which FMEs to perform. So it's open to suggestions from you all. Ultimately, we'll be asking at the end of this meeting to approve a selection of projects that we came up with based on these criteria. But as I mentioned, this is just first cut at this. So if you all want to modify what considerations we consider, what projects we have selected here initially, any input you all might have, feel free to interject and let us know and we can definitely make those changes. We don't have to make a vote on this today, since we're just getting started on this process. So just wanted to emphasize that. But one of the first considerations, since we have 176,000 to work with, we have to look at how much we came up with as a total study cost for each FME. One idea that we came up with to try to spread out the number of FMPs throughout the region that we can perform, or FMEs that we can perform, so we can get new FMPs in different parts of the region. Instead of performing an entire FME, we were thinking about maybe breaking it up and performing only a portion of certain FMEs. That way we can get more done throughout the region. And the reason we propose that is because there are several FMEs that involve stormwater master plans for certain cities, which involves coming up with the hydrology and hydraulic models, performing risk assessments or needs assessments, and in identifying what are the most at-risk locations, and performing that whole analysis might take up all or most of the entire budget we have to work with, and then we only end up with one FMP in one area. So what we are proposing is maybe we only do a portion of that, if we can get in touch with the local stakeholders, and if they can point us to where they have the most issues, where they think their biggest concerns are, we can focus our study rather than doing a master plan for that whole city. We can focus on that main project area that they have already identified and try to come up with an FMP to address that issue with a fraction of the total FME budget. And that way, we think we can tackle more areas with this budget that we have available. So so that's something we considered. Can it be broken out into lower costs? We also looked at the number of structures at risk, and we actually resorted the FME evaluation table from highest to lowest based on the number of structures at risk. And that's what we're going to look at in the next couple slides, how they came out when we resorted them that way. We looked at, is there representation throughout the region? We know that was a big concern in the initial draft of the RFP, that we had a lot of FMPs in El Paso County because that's where we had stormwater master plans available. We didn't really have those master plans available in other parts of the region. And so that is something we want to consider in this phase is the study located inside or outside of El Paso County? Would the study result in one or more FMP? There are some FMEs that are not necessarily project related. They might be a study that can provide information which can later on be used to identify a risk or maybe select a project, but it might not actually result in a specific project. So we only identified 3 of those, and we filtered those out of this analysis. Those tables that we're going to be presenting don't include those. The 3 that got omitted were FME number 15, which was to prioritize arroyos on their likelihood of producing sediment or debris flow. FME number 1, which was to develop a plan for a sediment and vegetation control program in the Rio Grande at El Paso. And number 18, which were to conduct flood risk assessments at El Paso locations where drainage is controlled by river stage and there are significant flood risks on the non-river side of the levee. So those 3 will not be in the tables that we'll present next, just because they weren't specific project related. Some of them had to do with a larger strategy where we would then use this information to conduct further studies. Has the FME sponsor coordinated with RFPG on RFP flood studies or projects? This was a big factor to consider because there are certain areas where we've reached out and we weren't able to get in touch, or we didn't get survey responses. In some of those cases, it could make it harder to use this approach if we're planning on identifying the biggest risk locations to focus in an area, if we can't get in touch with the local stakeholders who know the flood issues, or if we haven't been in touch with them previously, that's a factor. We added a column in these tables, a yes or no. Have we talked about projects with these stakeholders before? Because that can affect which ones we choose to select first and focus on first. Lastly, did the study involve analysis of existing dams? This is important because a lot of those FMEs which involve rehabilitating a dam or doing a watershed assessment, a supplemental watershed plan, for example, that takes, you have to follow specific criteria in doing those assessments, and those typically have a much higher cost associated with them. So if we have to do analysis of any existing dams, we added a column with a yes or no, because it likely would cost too much and we would spend too much budget in a specific area on trying to come up with solutions. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about next. These factors, we've added some columns into this FME table, which are in blue. These ones were not included in the RFP. These are new columns we came up with based on these criteria for this specific task. And just wanted to, before we jump into this and kind of start talking about them, open it back up to you all and see if there's any questions, comments, or any additional considerations that you all might have that you think we should take into account.
Hi, Chris. This is Omar. I made this request before, but one of the things that I'd like to do with this money, I don't know how the other members feel, is we'd rather go deeper on the planning instead of wider. The current plan as it is, we realize that it's very hard for us to actually access any future TWB funding because it's missing, especially like the benefit cost analyses. And so one of my biggest priorities with these additional monies, however we can fit them in, is for us to really go back and see how we can get a lot of that work done. I know it's expensive, but I'd rather have some projects that I can take to the board sooner rather than having to come up with, for example, with my boss or with other stakeholders and be like, we can't really do much with it now because we have to invest in another study interim. And so there's usually not enough time for us to wrap up the study and then go with the TWDB, or we can apply to TWDB in 2 years, and that just delays projects a whole bunch. So my preference would be for us to go as deep as possible when it comes to getting these projects ready to compete for funding. And I don't know how the other members might feel about that.
Just another comment, just a question. What's the yellow represent in the allocated cost for amendment phase column?
Those are the ones that we have identified as an initial cut for which ones we think we should tackle in this task 12, so which ones we thought we could perform. So yeah, we'll get into this whole table and talk about what the yellow and what the blue and all those columns mean. That's what we're about to get into.
So
I just noticed total there is only 145K.
Right. The blue is an additional 30,000, which we are sort of reserving based on how these initial assessments go. And if the stakeholders are able to identify areas of flood risk, or if we're able to see where the priority will likely be, then we just didn't want to overcommit by saying we're going to do these 6. So we're sort of reserving this last one in blue as a contingency, assuming that these other 5 are within the budget that we're anticipating.
Missed it, okay. Yeah, I missed the blue.
So just to partially answer what Omar was saying, is that this column here that says FME results in the new FMPs. So to define an FMP per the TWDB process, you have to have some kind of level of addressing of the cost benefit. So by having what we're doing here is we're basically selecting trying to find by interviews with the stakeholders what they think are their low-hanging fruit, that without a study that does this in a formal, rigorous process through a stormwater master plan, that you basically short circuit by talking directly to the stakeholder and say, what do you think is the area with the greatest risk that has the simplest solution, and have them come up with ideas, which we would then, with this allotted amount of money, come up with a definition of a project per the TWDB requirements, which would include the cost benefit ratio. So it doesn't look like this much, but it's that much, but it's focused on one particular project. I don't know if that answers Omar's issue or not.
Sorry, Jeff, give me 1 second. I was being asked a question.
What's kind of adverse effect on that?
That's a question you'd have. I wouldn't have an answer to that.
Do you want to post
Well,
that question, Dave?
I guess I have a question here that we were kind of discussing offline. If I'm wondering about the first two items on the list that to me are related to El Paso Stormwater Master Plan and the funding that the city, I guess, is receiving, not county. The city, yeah, EP Water receives to execute those actions, and whether those really need to get the emphasis that we're out of the 176K. Do we need to pay attention to those, or am I off in the wrong direction here?
Okay, so yeah, to start this discussion, these top two rows are basically both catch-all FMEs for any projects from the stormwater master plans for the city, which is the first one, or for the county of El Paso, which did not make it into the plan as FMPs.
Right.
There were.
I think the question is, that's not the question. I think that question's understood. The question, it was not for us, Chris. I think the question he posed was for the planning group, not us.
Well, yeah, I was just going to give a little bit of background, basically, to make sure that we understand what these first two columns are, because we haven't really explained it yet. But basically, there are 52 projects in this FME from the city stormwater master plan, and there are 21 projects from the county stormwater master plan, which are included in each of these FMEs to later be considered as FMPs. Now, there are actually more projects total in the city and county master plans, like 96 and 76 roughly in the city and county plans. But this is a subset of those that through coordination with them that we selected for consideration in this FME. And we've got a table of those projects later on in the presentation. We're going to look at these. But basically, these are the projects. This is the labor cost for each one of these for the city. We've got another slide here for the county. So basically, we were allocating 25,000 to the city and 25,000 to the county to select out of these amounts which FMEs we can do. And the reason we allocated that amount is because El Paso County is the most populated county in the region. But we do understand that there have already been some FMPs allocated to them, or that were selected for analysis in the initial phase of the draft RFP. So yeah, at that, now that I've kind of explained those, I'll turn it back to you all at the RFPG if you all want to discuss that further, or if you have any issues with allocating 25,000 to each, both the city and the county, and then having these other three be for the Pecos, City of Pecos, City of Alpine, City of Kermit. And like I said, as a contingency, if we can squeeze it in within our budget, we would like to do the City of Presidio as well. And again, that's based on these 4 columns that we talked about earlier in these criteria that we added. So with that, I'll kind of hand it back to you all. I don't know if there's anything else to add, Dave or Omar, on that selection, or Isela from EP Water. I think we got Gilbert from Gilbert Saldana is here from El Paso County. So feel free to have a discussion if you all agree with these first 2 or not.
Levi has a question.
Levi, yeah, I was gonna say Levi has a question.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but the city of Kermit, I almost want to say they've engaged Park Hill, a firm that has a Midland office and an El Paso office, to do a overall master drainage plan for their municipality, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Have y'all
Right.
heard anything on that?
Yeah, we actually had a meeting with them during the development of the draft RFP. I believe Annette was there in person, and AECOM, Jeff and I were there through Teams, and they did confirm some of the initial locations that we had identified with our floodplain mapping, with the Fathom floodplain mapping as being at risk. We saw some pictures where they had streets underwater. Apparently they have a lot of playa flooding there. And they did say that Park Hill Smith Cooper was their engineer that they've worked with. And they directed us to their consultant, their primary individual at that company, to let us know, what his perception is of their major flooding issues, and if they had any projects. And we did reach out to him, and they confirmed that there's playa flooding on the east side of the city that they might be able to fix with a detention pond in a park. And they did have some ideas for that they were going to send our way. However, we followed up a couple times during the development of the plan, and we never received that information. So, we plan to follow up again. Basically, we ran out of time. We had to get everything submitted. So that one slipped through the cracks. But basically, as part of this effort, we would set up another meeting with Kermit and their consultant and really try to get that information so that we can study it further and come up with an FMP.
So I guess my question is, with those funds, there's still a need for that FMP for an overall master drainage plan. That isn't something that's already been prepared or needing to be updated, correct?
Oh, from what we understood from our initial meeting, it didn't seem like there was an actual plan that had been prepared. It seemed like they knew about some areas of risk and had some ideas about projects, but our understanding was that they had not prepared a plan, and it didn't seem like they were in the process of developing an actual plan. But if that is the case, through our next coordination meeting, if we find out maybe they're further along in that planning process than we thought, that could only be beneficial in the sense that, we could pick up where they left off and try to create an FMP, using their best available models and what they've already identified. So I think we would still, we might consider in the amendment phase, maybe changing this FME or getting rid of this FME after we've performed it and come up with the FMPs from that. There may no longer be a need for a stormwater master plan if that's going to be done by the time the amendment phase is completed. So that is one thing I wanted to mention, is that if we go this route and we take 30,000 from the total 92,000 budget for the city of Pecos Stormwater Master Plan, we would then go back in the amendment phase and reduce that amount for the Pecos Master Plan from 92,000 to something less than that. Likely, we would subtract that 32,000, leaving 62,000 for that FME, since we've already performed some of that. Does that answer your question, Levi?
Yeah, I just don't, if Park Hill's already doing it or the city of Kermit's, pretty far along in that process, I don't know if we need it here. But maybe that's just something y'all could possibly follow up on in another coordination meeting to verify that is still needed. Because I'm sure there's other projects on the list that could use those funds, if it's not.
Right. Well, I guess the main goal here is to come up with FMPs from these FMEs. So if they've already done this FME, then we would take what they've done and develop an FMP from their highest priority projects. And so once it's in the plan as an FMP, then it will be eligible for construction and final design funding. So yeah, we might not need that whole 30,000 if they've already done a lot of that initial FME work. We would just have to, analyze it as an FMP at that point. And in that case, we could then maybe tackle Presidio like we thought, and maybe save some money. And so, yeah, that is definitely going to be a consideration and something that we talk about with the stakeholders in the initial meetings that we set up.
Listening to them.
Okay, so I have a comment. For instance, with the city of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan, we've already done the studies, and what we're missing in those is the BC. And of course, without the BC, we cannot apply or submit it for grant funding. That would be an extra task that would need to be done prior to submittal of the grant application. And we usually don't have the time to do that. So, and I'm not sure if I'm understanding correctly, but for the city of El Paso, we would need to go deeper as far as getting a BCR for those projects. Whereas in other communities, they may need to do a master plan, right? Is that what we're saying?
Or just, wider, more FM.
So do more FMEs. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, or
Yeah, let me clarify. That is correct. The scope of work that we'd be doing for these city and county master plans with this 25,000 is going to be different than the scope of work we would be doing with these other 4 cities, because these other 4 cities don't have a stormwater master plan. We'd basically be not starting from scratch, assuming that the stakeholders have some ideas of what their major flooding areas are, but we'd be starting from an earlier phase than we would with the city and county projects. However, for all these projects, the goal would be to come up with at least one FMP that we can add to the amended flood plan. And in those FMPs, you would have to do a benefit cost analysis. So basically the end result is if all goes according to plan, we would have 5 new FMPs, either 1 or 2 for the city and the county each, depending on which ones that they select out of these lists. If they select an expensive one of 20,000, then maybe they can only do 1, but there's some in here for 5,000. There's one for 12,000, so they could potentially do 2 each with that 25,000. But then for these other 3, we'd have to create new models and figure out what those are going to be. So they're going to take a little bit more effort. So we've allocated more money for those ones. But yes, to answer your question, we would be coming up with a benefit cost ratio for each of these areas with these funds, because that's a requirement of each FMP.
One question though, several of the current FMPs that are in the plan have a 0 or near 0 BCR. Can we expect the level of detail in these new FMPs to be something a little bit more competitive? Because with a 0 BCR, I can't get it funded no matter what I do.
Yeah, it's going to depend on the number of structures that are protected by the FMPs. So, one of the challenges associated with the first RFP was going through this process for the first time, and in trying to select which FMPs, which projects would have the biggest benefits. And once we've gone through the whole process and those BCRs come out lower, there wasn't really a chance to go back and add more detail like roadway benefits, damages to roadways, and that type of analysis. If that's something that you all would like to see in these FMPs, I think we're at a point now where we've gone through the process once. We can likely add in that level of detail to the analysis. We can't guarantee that it's going to result in a higher BCR until we actually do the analysis and select the projects, but we can certainly try to select projects which we anticipate would have the highest BCR.
Chris, but are we using FEMA's toolkit for the BCR? Because that one's very specific on what needs to be included.
Right. So in the amendment phase, in the initial phase, we used the same BCR methods with small tweaks to them, which were used for the county stormwater master plan. Those are based on the FEMA toolkit, like the damage curves that they used were part of that FEMA toolkit. We didn't use all of the aspects of that toolkit, but we used some of them. So I guess the answer is yes, but only partially. We didn't actually use the official toolkit. We used the method from the El Paso County plan.
So if, I'm not sure if Texas Water Development Board will require FEMA's toolkit to be used, so why can't we?
It's an option, but you get to propose your own.
So I guess it's up to us to determine what type of method we want to include as part of this BCR for it to be more accurate.
For TWDB, yes. For example, one key difference is FEMA doesn't allow any agricultural damages at all, but TWDB will consider it. So that's why I think, at least for my case, I enjoy AECOM's approach on using a hybrid approach where they take the best out of.
Okay. Well, yeah, which it's where I was going, it'll be a customized BCR approach where we can benefit, the urban and also the agricultural areas, where both would benefit from this BCR.
And my understanding is that the county methodology is more conducive to those mutual benefits, because if we go straight to FEMA, then
Okay.
none of my projects would ever get funded.
Oh, okay. All right, we're covered.
Okay.
All right, and yeah, I will emphasize, that there are some projects within the El Paso County Stormwater Master Plan that benefit both the irrigation district as well as the county and the residences. And I believe there's also some within the EP Water Stormwater Master Plan, so there could be some overlap there. We haven't sat down and discussed which projects to select yet with EP Water in the county, but we might be able to kill two birds with one stone in the sense that this one that we skipped over, number 33, the fourth row on the list, that's the city of Socorro. We skipped over that because it is within El Paso County, and we wanted to spread it out throughout the region. But depending on our coordination with the county, they might select a project which affects the city of Socorro. So it's there are opportunities for synergy or killing two birds with one stone in this, maybe helping out some of these cities that have stormwater master plans as well as the county, or that don't have stormwater master plans, as well as the county. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? This is only the first half of the list, by the way. These are additional FMEs, but as I mentioned, we filtered it by the most structures at risk. So these ones on this first slide had the most number of structures at risk, and so these all were lower. So we didn't select any from this second page, but as I mentioned before, if you add up these 6 projects, they come out to about 175,000, which is our budget, and we're proposing to hold on to that 30,000, not commit to that last one in Presidio just yet until after we've had our initial meetings with the stakeholders and we can get a good idea if how those studies might progress. If there's no comments or objections to those ones that we've selected, I'll just state them one more time. We would use 25,000 to select 1 or 2 from the city master plan, 25,000 to select 1 or 2 from the county master plan, 30,000 for the city of Pecos, 35,000 for city of Alpine, 30,000 for city of Kermit, and 30,000 for Presidio if we can fit it within the budget. And then after that, I was going to kind of go through just the maps that we had from the RFP for each of those areas. This is for the city FMEs. It covers these areas, which are based on the watershed planning regions. This is from map exhibit 19 of the master plan. These are the total list of projects. If you added them all up, it's 1.3 million to do all the studies. The total project cost is over here on the right, just for reference. That would be 234 million to actually construct them all. Similarly for the county, these are the areas within El Paso County outside of the city limits where their projects are located. And this is the list of projects that are included in that FME. There's 21. Total of 276,000, and if you add up the project construction costs, it's 135 million. The next one here is the city of Pecos. So you can see the primary watershed contributing to flooding in that city, and you've also got the Pecos River to the east here. And this is a zoomed in map from map 15, which is the greatest flood risk. It shows the structures at risk in this city. And so, likely it looks like there's a big cluster here in the middle. I know that there are several low water crossings that go through there. So that would, if we can fix some low water crossings, that would check the box on another RFPG goal of reducing the number of low water crossings at risk. This next one is the city of Alpine. We've got 2 major watersheds contributing through here. We've also got a zoomed in map as well showing the structures at risk. I know that Jeff Bennett had mentioned there are some stream restoration needs in this area as well, some work related to that. So that can be a topic of conversation that we have with those initial stakeholders. Maybe we can do some of that work as well as solving flood issues. Obviously, eliminating flood concern would be the primary goal, but if that can be a secondary benefit, that would help the overall score that these FMPs are going to be getting by the Texas Water Development Board when they rank them all in the state. The next one is the city of Kermit. You can see these 2 major watersheds. These are the structures we identified at risk in Kermit. So a significant number. And like I said, when we met with them, they did show some pictures of some streets underwater due to very flat topography and playa flooding. So, it's going to be a challenge to eliminate that. But like we said, Parker Smith Cooper, Park Hill Smith Cooper, they had some ideas about some detention ponds. So we'll see. I believe maybe this might be the park they were talking about to help relieve some of that flooding. So hopefully we'll get in touch with them as part of these initial coordination meetings. And lastly, we have Presidio. We've got one major watershed for Cibolo Creek, which is protected by levees, protecting the city from those. You can see that a lot of the buildings at risk here are due to the levee not being considered by the existing FEMA floodplain, because that levee is not certified for Cibolo Creek. So if that levee were to be certified, a lot of these buildings would get out of the floodplain. If we were to focus on some of these other areas, it might remove a lot less houses from the floodplain. But that's something that we'll have to talk about with the local stakeholders, and then we would have a meeting with you all. Once we come up with some initial ideas, some certain in specific locations, we would present that to you all and get your feedback on whether we still think we should move forward with an FMP for those locations. So that's all I have to talk about.
Chris, can we go back? Chris, can we go back to the table again? Because David posed a question and then we went in a different direction. David, I don't know if you got the answer that you were looking for when you asked your question.
I'm satisfied with the response I got in the discussion that we had here.
Okay,
it clarified exactly what I was asking.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Yep.
So if there are no other questions or comments, the next part of this is to turn it back to you all for a vote. If you think that this process and these considerations are acceptable, and this initial list, these allocated amounts, again, we've got the first 5 in yellow, which I've stated here. For the 5 shaded in yellow, we'll perform a partial study, which is contingent upon getting input from local stakeholders. If we talk to them and they have no idea what their flooding issues are, and they have no ideas for projects, we might have to reevaluate if this budget's going to be sufficient. And that's part of the reason we've kind of reserved this last 30,000. For those cases, we'll come back to the RFPG and say, look, this area doesn't have any projects. Do we still want to spend some additional funding to try to come up with those, or do we want to just skip over that and maybe go straight to Presidio? That'll be a decision we make later on. So that's why I've said a 6th FME shaded in blue will be performed if budget allows. And this last bullet is just saying, it's based on these budgets, which are partial from the total FME budgets. So with that, I'll turn it to Annette or Omar. I'm not sure which one of y'all wants to lead this to see if y'all are comfortable making a vote. If not, if you want to think about it and discuss later on, we can do that as well.
Well, what do you all think?
I think we need to have an internal discussion and see what we all feel comfortable with, so that we can distribute the work among everybody equally.
Well, the results though aren't necessarily going to be equal results. The results for the first 2 are going to be much deeper results from what we were talking about than the results that we anticipate for the other 3.
Right, but
or the other 4. I'm sorry.
Just can I comment on that for just a second? So the purpose is to create, all of these are going to create fully documented FMPs, and the reason the budget is so small for these smaller cities like Pecos and Kermit is that you're only dealing with a single watershed. And so we should be able to develop a project with sufficient detail to make it competitive, but it would be contingent upon the sponsor saying, we think that this is a pretty much a slam dunk project because it's going to have an awful lot of benefits. And we just think those are going to be relatively, if they identify the watershed that has the biggest problem, and we can talk through what the solutions are, we think we can get to a detailed definition of an FMP with this amount of funding. And it's only because we're dealing with a single project. It's basically a concept design for a single project, like a single channel improvement or for a single regional detention pond or whatever. We think we can make something with reasonable detail approximating what the county and the city has.
All three of these are one. You think those
They're
are
all
good?
just single projects.
Just my opinion, Jeff, I don't think that's enough for drainage studies for that. Just have dealing with some of these entities. So just my opinion, I don't think that's enough money to do those projects.
So I guess it would be that. I mean, how comfortable are you guys with the money, with the funds allocated to each one of these? If it's doable with those funds, then I think I'd be good with them. But if we're not going to be able to get a full FMP, then we would need to go back and see which ones are would be easier to fund, to get grant funding for.
And you guys are going to focus on the top 5 and then do the 6th one, assuming those funds are still available?
Right, because, we could have presented this and said, that take that 30,000 for Presidio and add 10,000 to each of these, which it, might end up being what it costs. It might be 40,000 for City of Pecos, 45,000 for Alpine, 40,000 for City of Kermit, depending on the level of feedback we get from these initial stakeholder meetings. So that's why we're kind of reserving this last 30,000 in case it does end up costing more than we think. But yeah, we do feel comfortable if these initial meetings go how we're thinking they might go, since we have had initial contact with all of these locations, all of these stakeholders before. We think that they would have somewhat of an idea of which areas they think we should focus on. And once we've had those initial meetings, we can have another RFPG meeting, get you all informed on where we stand, and then see if we still want to continue with this approach.
So Chris, can you go back to the Pecos map? So addressing what Javier's saying, I mean, I understand what he's saying, but we've already got these maps already that show basically, if you go back to the Pecos one.
Yeah, these are both Pecos, by the way. This is the overall contributing watershed.
Yeah, I want that one. So, basically, I think if we sit down with the city of Pecos and say, which of these areas are real, a lot of them are on single waterways, right? There may be something that we can come up with that gives us an initial idea of what the solution is and where it might be sited. And if that's the case, we can get something done for $30,000 that defines what an FMP is, I think. It won't be based upon a surveyed site, which is where maybe Javier's talking about, but we didn't have surveyed sites for a lot of the work that we did for the county. We just had LiDAR for the county and the cities.
So the 5th project on the list is the Stormwater Master Plan for the City of Kermit. So we need to verify if indeed they're already working on a Stormwater Master Plan and if it includes the VCR. And if it doesn't, I think we need to leave it in here. If they're not working on it, we need to leave it in here. But if they are, then that's something that we need to understand what the type of master plan the type of product they're going to be getting.
Right, and yeah, from what we understood from our initial coordination with that stakeholder and with Park Hill Smith Cooper, they had done some analysis, but it didn't seem, at least at that point, that they had any sort of document they could share with us or specific project details when we followed up with them multiple times. They did have ideas that they shared, but they couldn't give us any plans at that point. So they might be further along in the process at this point, but yeah, that's something that we would report to you all in the next RFPG meeting, how that coordination went.
Okay, thank you.
And then that could ultimately motivate a shift of the funding downward toward the Presidio action.
Yes, that's a potential outcome there. Or
Okay.
we might find out if you all want to stick with the city of Kermit as having, you know, an FMP, maybe some of this money we allocate and say, okay, this is based on where they're at. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more. Maybe their alternative that they think is the best alternative to study is a complex one to analyze if it involves, you know, storm drains or channels that could make flooding worse. You know, that could take more effort to analyze. It just kind of depends on the type of solution. If it's a detention or a dam, which, like they mentioned, they thought it would be detention, you know, that's something relatively straightforward to model. And then we think we could do it in that budget.
Is there anybody out there in the voting group or public for comment, I guess, that has an issue with us having a motion right now to accept these?
Yeah.
All right, I'm not hearing anything. I guess I'll make a motion then to accept the selection of FMEs as presented by ECOM.
I'll second.
Please repeat. Somebody make it second.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
I think that's just a late.
Yeah, it's the leg.
So then, in terms of our next meeting, AECom, what are you thinking needs to happen next?
I think that, in 30 days, we're going to have the end of the comment period, the public comment period, and we can hopefully hold at least some of these initial stakeholder meetings within that time. But I think if we maybe plan on 6 weeks from now, about a month and a half, that would bring us to the end of October, early November, at which time we're also expected to get some of the comments or all of the comments from TWDB if they are able to. So, you know, I'm thinking maybe early November we can come back and have another meeting, and hopefully we'll have you know, receive those comments. We can talk about those, and we can talk about these initial meetings. I think by then we could probably have held all of these meetings with these stakeholders, and yeah. So if that works for everybody, then that's what I would propose, is that week of October 31st through November 4th, having the next RPG meeting.
Okay, so then what I'll do is I'll send out a poll and ask which date is best for everyone during that period.
Yeah.
You might want to send a poll out too, because we're going to have to schedule the other meeting as well, so we can get approval on the final submittal of the RFP document as well. And that's going to be sometime in December. So
Gilbert, you're suggesting that we ask for both meeting dates?
yes,
Availability?
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's going to be a little harder in December since you got holidays coming up, but we do need to have that final meeting for the final approval.
Okay. So I'll put out a poll for the 31st to the 4th, and then I'll look at the first week of December. The 5th through the 9th. Or the last week of November, yeah, 5th through the 9th. Okay,
So that 5th through the 9th, that's the one to approve the updated RFPG. I'm sorry, the updated RFP after addressing comments.
yes,
Basically to adopt the RFP. Okay. Yeah, I think we were thinking about mid-December on that one. So, another option is the 12th through 16th, but if that's getting too close to the holidays, then yeah, maybe we should just stick with the 5th through the 9th.
okay, I will,
Acronym stuff.
I'm thinking though that if you all can't, if you all cannot, if you're still gonna be up against the deadline, then maybe we push it to the 12th or the 16th?
Well, maybe if we send out the doodle poll for the 5th through the 16th, that 2-week period instead of 1-week period, then we can get an idea of what works best for everyone over those 2 weeks, and then we could choose it based on that.
Okay. All right, I will do that. So I think that's all, Omar, for agenda item 9.
All right, so I guess I need to, if for some reason we hold it late in that window of time, is there enough time after that for you guys to fix anything? Are you comfortable with after 16 December being able to fix something before your turn in suspense?
Yeah,
I think we should be good.
Yeah, I think we'd prefer that earlier week of the 5th through the 9th, just in case there is something that needs to be fixed because of the holidays. But yeah, if we need to, we'll get it done, because yep, that's the deadline. Is January 10th is the final deadline, and we, as Gilbert mentioned, we need to approve at least 14 days before January 10th. So that would bring us to December 27th being the latest that we could have that meeting.
And obviously you can't do it then. Why don't we just go with the first week then?
Okay.
And not go all the way through the 16th? Why don't we just go 5 through 9?
Okay.
I think it's
I'll be
better.
in California that week. I don't know if you'll have.
We will miss you.
Okay.
But you can also join us virtually from California, Jeff.
As long as there's enough electricity for you to plug into.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
So then, just as a reminder, before we adjourn, we are going to meet again today at 5 p.m. If I can have at least 7 of you virtually or in person, we need a quorum for the public meeting. We'll start at 5. We'll have a short presentation on the plan, and then we'll wait for the public to make a comment. And we may have to wait a while, or we might get some, we might not get any, but at some point the chair will decide when to call that meeting. And I think that's how we'll get through it. So are there any questions for me with regard to this 5 o'clock meeting, 6 o'clock for Central Time?
There was a presentation attached to that agenda.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming that before public comments are made, that presentation will be made?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Anybody?
So
Sure. Yeah, you got it all second. Now, we got several
Gisela
motions.
first,
Okay.
Dave second, but they fought for it hard. But Gisela won.
Okay.
Okay.
Levi beat me to the
All in
previous one.
All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Okay, Carlos got. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
See you
Y'all have a great rest of your day.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gotta go home and feed dogs.
Yeah.